Hello, I'm Faye.
And I'm Becky. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about maximising your potential as a leader and living your best life personally and professionally.
So join us on the M53 for our weekly chats, full of insights and inspiration, and of course, a cuppa and a butty.
Faye, it's called a brew. Thank you for joining us again. On this episode, we are going to be looking at moving out of your comfort zone and of moving beyond our fears. And I know that Faye has a story that she wants to share with us here, and I haven't heard this story yet either. So I'm really looking forward to hearing it at the same time as you. So Faye, what is it that you wanted to share with us about moving beyond your fears?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. There are a couple of reasons that I wanted to talk about fear and moving beyond your fear today. I think really the reason we're talking about this today is because I have a blog on my website, and one of my blogs is searched for every single day, and it's called The Magic Happens Outside of Your Comfort Zone. And if people are searching comfort zone on Google, then I think it's something we need to talk about on the podcast. I was thinking about I don't want to repeat the blog. The blog literally talks about how we have a comfort zone, how we have a fear zone, a learning zone, and mastery. And you can go and have a look at that. It's called The Magic Happens Outside of Your Comfort Zone. But I wanted to talk about how fear impacts us and why we feel the fear. And there's a great book, I believe, by Susan Jeffers. I do have it on my bookshelf, but I've never read it because of the size of it, if I'm honest with you. It's a small book and it's quite old print, and I've just never got past the first couple of pages. But Susan Jeffers is renowned for her book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But fear is something that's been a part of my life. And actually, I was reminded, I can't remember how I was reminded, it probably just pinged into my head, that at the end of 2020, I declared that 2021 was going to be the year of Fearless Faye. And I remembered that a few weeks ago, and I was almost a bit shocked. Fearless Faye, goodness me, what was going on for me at the end of 2020 that I needed to declare that the year of 2021 was going to be the year of Fearless Faye? Clearly stuff was going on for me. And I knew that I was stepping out of, I was making changes in my business, and it was probably all to do with that. And I wanted to really embrace some new things, which I have to the point that I'd completely forgotten about Fearless Faye. So that's absolutely fantastic. But I do want to talk about fear, because fear is something that gets me. And I know it probably gets you too, because it gets all of us. And that is because I think it was back in episode 2 when we talked about mindset. We talked about the things that we want to do. But before we can take action on our decisions, we feel that emotion. And that emotion kind of dictates what action we take. And those emotions generally sort of fall out of two. They fall out of fear or they fall out of love. Those are the two emotions that we feel. And if we're feeling the love emotion, we're feeling joy, we're in flow, we can do things happen naturally for us. We just get on with it and we do it, and it all feels lovely. But if the emotion comes out of fear, we might feel stress, overwhelm, tension, a bit of anxiety. And it needn't be massive feelings of fear or stress or overwhelm. It could be just slight feelings, but we feel it in our body. You know, if our heart starts racing about something, that's coming from that fear emotion, and it's triggering us in some way, shape, or form. And what can then happen is that the fear can stop us dead in our tracks, depending on, you know, if we've got a scale of 1 to 10, how are we feeling the fear? If it's a lower end of that scale, we might be able to move through that fear a little bit easier than we can if it's a size 10, for example. But things that happen to us in our life, our brain has basically been cataloguing all the things that are happening to us and creating our beliefs. Our belief system is generated around the things that happen to us and how we feel about it. So often we can feel fear because we have a certain belief about something, which may or may not be true. Just because we've got a belief about something, it doesn't mean to say it's true. It's just the way our brain sees things. So I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about when I worked in employed land, when I was actually employed rather than having my own business. I'm going to say I didn't feel much fear. I probably did, looking back on it with rose-tinted glasses probably. But there was one thing that I particularly didn't like doing, and that was presentations and speaking in public. And I didn't like doing it. And I think a lot of people don't like doing it. I did hate standing up, everybody's eyes on me, feeling everybody looking at me and then having to talk. And I always come up with now, I'm not a super visible person or a person who feels comfortable being super visible. I do push myself to be visible. I have to. I've got my own business. I have to. But I'm not super confident or super comfortable being visible. But I understand the importance of it. And I was thinking about my time being employed when I didn't like standing up doing presentations. And what I always come back to now is, have I got enough to say? Which is quite funny, given that we're doing this podcast, Becky, or doing a podcast. But have I got enough to say? Who'd want to listen to me? So that's what it comes back to. And I was thinking to myself, where's this come from? Where does this come from in my life? And I remember when I was at primary school, and Becky can add a lovely story to this about her own daughter, which is beautiful. But when I was at primary school, I used to play the piano. I used to learn the piano, and I was given the opportunity to play in assembly. And yes, that was a massive thing for me. I did feel scared to do that, but I didn't feel so much fear that I didn't do it. I did. I learnt my piece of music, and I felt proud to sit at the piano in the school hall and play my piece during assembly. Now, I remember having a conversation with my mum. And my mum said to me, don't worry about everybody looking at you. They're listening. They're just going to be listening at the beautiful piece of music you're going to play. And if you're a little bit scared, just see them as a field of cabbages. See them as a field of cabbages growing in a field. And I struggled a bit with that visualization. I do struggle with visualizations like that, but I've never forgotten that. Just see people as a field of cabbages. They were all sitting there, as you can imagine, primary school, sat on the floor, cross-legged. And I did it, and I played my piece, and I was fine. And, I got some good feedback, and I felt really proud of myself for doing this. So somewhere between then and being at work, I didn't want to be doing these presentations. And actually, my boss made me do them because he knew that I didn't like doing them. So he said, we will get through this fear. The more you do, the better you'll be. And yes, I can agree with that. But actually, I needed to know what was stopping me. And so I remembered a situation in senior school where we were doing swimming as our PE lesson. And we were doing widths, and our teacher was teaching us about the technique of front crawl. So what she wanted us to do was she wanted us to do the arm movements properly. She wanted us to put our head into the water and turn our head at the right time and breathe at the right time and do all of that. And we'd come back to the side, and she said, right then, she said, I'm going to do, I'd like somebody to demonstrate. She said, Faye, I would like you to do a width and back, so 2 widths, across and back, and show everybody your technique. So I thought to myself, wow, because I'm not a strong swimmer. I don't really enjoy swimming. So whilst I can swim, I've been to all the swimming lessons, or to a certain point, I can get by. And I remember my mum saying, well, you're learning to swim, Faye, because if you fall into a river, which I've got to be honest, I've never done that yet. Never fallen into a river yet. But if I fell into a river, I'd know what to do. I'd know, regardless of whether I actually do it, because it would be very cold, but I'd know what to do. So it's more from a essential skills point that I, did swimming lessons, but I've never wanted to be AD and PT or anything like that. Anyway, I digress. So I thought to myself, wow, I must be doing this really right. So I did my best. I swam across and I swam back, and I put my all into swimming as the teacher had told me to, and I thought I must be really showing that I'm good at this. And when I got back to the side, she said, and that's how not to do it. Now, Helen, if you could just demonstrate the correct way. And obviously now I can turn around and think, you bitch, because it's really bitchy thing to do, isn't it? Fancy as a teacher doing that. But, okay, she was demonstrating that I wasn't doing it to the exact method that she wanted it. I was probably pretty awful, let's be honest. I was probably pretty awful. But at the time when she asked me, I thought I must be doing this really well. And none of my friends said, that was a bit of rubbish swimming there. No, nobody made comment on it. It was sort of, we moved on really quickly. But I know that I've never forgotten that moment of being the person who was singled out to show myself to the class of how not to do something. And so I know that my brain has catalogued that time. And when I have to stand up and do something myself to show, what I'm doing, what I'm saying, I have that fear of somebody saying that's not right, because my brain has the evidence to go back to. And my belief is that I have to be right. I have to be perfect before I put myself out there. And that's where that fear comes from for me. And so when I was doing lots of presentations that I had to do when I was at work, yes, I got semi-comfortable with doing them. I did feel the fear and I did them anyway. But I didn't recognise then where that fear came from, what belief that fear was bringing back, to the forefront. And now I'm aware of that, I can think, well, actually, it doesn't matter, I never professed to be a strong swimmer. I never wanted to be in a swimming team. I just want to be able to save myself when I fall in the river, right? If I fall in the river. But for other things in my life, they are important to me. The role that I play now in my business is important to me, and the job that I did at the time was important to me. And yes, I did do well. And I remember, I used to get great feedback from standing up and talking to my audience. But I remember one time a guy in the audience said, "Great presentation, Faye, but you've got a bit of punctuation wrong on one of your slides," which, to be fair, I hadn't done the slides. So they'd been done for me, and there was a bit of punctuation wrong. And you know what? And I remember thinking at the time, oh, crikey, need to go back and change that, must get it right. Now I think to myself, well, crikey, if that's all you've got to say, then, whose issue is that, yours or mine? I don't really worry about those sorts of things now. But that's how fear can get you, and that's how fear can stop you in your tracks. But it might be from something that's coming up as a fear for you, making your heart pound, but it might be from something that's happened to you that's not really that important in the past, that doesn't really matter. But because our brains are the complex systems they are, that's what it's catalogued for me. And I wanted to share this story with you today because I remember being in my own, having my own business, and I was doing a mastermind, a LinkedIn mastermind. And the person running the mastermind said, right, you need to go out and you need to do a video on LinkedIn. And I did do it. And I pushed myself to do it because I will push myself to do things. But it's not that I didn't feel the fear. I did. And I still do when I go live on LinkedIn. Becky and I have done a few lives on LinkedIn, and we both we sit there, we have a bit of a giggle. But, when I'm doing my own lives on LinkedIn, or just LinkedIn videos or Facebook lives or whatever, I do feel it. But I don't feel it enough to stop me anymore. But I know a lot of people fear things like that seem trivial, but it stops you dead in your tracks. And it is important just to look back and think, where has this come from? And what do I need to change? I need to change that belief or that cataloguing of events and I need to understand what really happened. And there's a great question. You know, you can say to yourself, whatever you're fearful of doing, think about how the fear comes up in you. Have a think about where you feel it in your body as well. Where are you feeling that fear? For me, I always feel it in just below my throat, in the top of my chest. It's like a big block. You know, it's like I've got something stuck in my throat, but quite deep down. And visualize yourself doing the thing you're fearful of doing, but also say to yourself, is this true? Am I really scared of doing this? And one of my clients always used to say to me, what's the worst that can happen? Because we'd talk about something that she'd want to do. And I'd say to her, how do you feel about doing this? And she'd say, well, I'm all right, really. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? And that's a great thing to say. What is the worst that can happen? And work it out. What's the worst that can happen? Because if the worst that can happen is someone's going to criticize your punctuation, it's really not worth worrying about, is it? You know, it's not. But I know, Becky, you've got a great analogy of how you see your fear. But also, I don't know, I haven't asked you, but if you want to share what your daughter said about going to I think it was Brownies, wasn't it? Or martial arts.
Oh, it was martial arts, yeah.
Share that, because it's beautiful.
I will, but you know, Faye, I just have to acknowledge the story that you've just shared first, actually, and thank you for sharing that, sort of with me and with anyone that's listening to this podcast, because what I think it really highlights is the power that what to that swimming teacher was probably just a throwaway action, probably something that they did all the time, didn't even think about the impact that had, the knock-on effects that then had on you through the years. And it's fantastic that you were able to actually go back and pinpoint that moment and be like, oh my goodness, it came from a swimming teacher. It doesn't actually swimming. It's not something that's important to me, but so many people aren't able to go back and pinpoint that and realize that it's unimportant. So I think it's a really important reminder to all of us of the power that our actions and our words can have on someone else without us even realizing it. But yes, my daughter, goodness me. So she went to her first martial arts lesson a few weeks ago. So her BFF and future husband, if you listen to them, yes, they are going to be married. They know the colour of the front door. They know the colour of the car that they are having. So her BFF
just remind me, she's 5.
She's 6.
She's 6.
So she is 6. So her and this young man, they already have their futures planned out, and he goes to martial arts. So she asked if she could give it a try. So absolutely. And at the end of the class, she came out. She was absolutely full of beans, loving it. But parents couldn't go in, couldn't watch. You leave them at the door. So off she went in, she sat on the mat, took her shoes off. And at the end of it, we came out, we're chatting to her, and she's showing us all the moves that she's learned. And we said, how many kids were in there? She said, well, the sensei said there was 27. And we were like, that is amazing that you have, we are so proud of you that you have gone into that room with all these new people and you only knew one of them and you've just gone and got on with it. And she said, well, I just pretended everyone else in there was a chicken, so it made it really easy. She is 6 years old, and that is the strategy that she had come up with for going into this room full of people that she didn't know, and she'd come up with it all by herself. Honestly, this kid, it's going to be an absolute privilege to watch her grow, because she is already a serious powerhouse of an individual.
And I was just going to say, it's fantastic. I was 8 when my mum told me to imagine everybody as a cabbage. I didn't come up with that, and she did. And I think that's beautiful, but so strong-minded.
It is. And I feel a bit of pressure actually as her parent to not knock that out of her, by my words and actions that I don't even realize the impact that, that they could be having, much like Faye's swimming teacher. Because I if she can keep that until she's an adult, then goodness me, the things that will be possible for her, I don't think I could even dream of. But I love that you mentioned about feel the fear, Faye, because feel the fear, I don't know if I've even shared this with you before, and do it anyway, was my family motto when we were growing up.
Oh.
So ever since I've been knee-high to a grasshopper, as my parents would say, that has been the family motto. And so whenever something has come up, we've talked about, well, we'll feel the fear. And I must admit, I've not read the book either, but I've always had that in the back of my mind. And even now as an adult, when it came to starting my business, and I called up my parents, and I was chatting to my dad, and I was going through all these things of, but what about this and what about that, and I can't do this and I can't do that, and who on earth am I to run a business, and who's going to want to be coached by me, and blah 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 blah. And he said to me, so what's happening here? And I said, I'm feeling the fear. He said, okay, so what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway, And that was the conversation. So even now, even in my 30s, that is still the conversation that we go back to. But when it comes to my fear, I'm quite a visual person. And so I do very much visualize my fear and my comfort zone. And I'll do my best to describe it to you now so that you can see it with me. So I imagine my fear that I am in a box. I'm in this big cardboard box, and it's standing on the edge of a chessboard. And that when I peek out of this box, this chessboard goes on for infinity. It's as far as I can see. And I'm not a person who typically takes baby steps when it comes to pushing out of my comfort zone. I kind of run out sprinting, and I go all in, and then I kind of have a moment of panic, and I race back into my box, and I stay in my box for a little while. I shut it up and I stay in there where I'm safe. And then I peek out again, and then I find this new moment of bravery, and I feel the fear, and I do it anyway. And out I come sprinting out of my box again, and I run back in. And this cycle goes on and on and on. But then it's only as time has passed that I've thought, I'm still running back into my box, that when I have then peeked over the edge of my box, looking backwards, that I see actually the box has moved down the chessboard. The box is no longer stood at the edge of the chessboard, and now the chessboard in the other direction goes on for infinity as far as I can see. So my comfort zone has moved with me.
Lovely. Yeah, and it does. Our comfort zone expands, and that's the thing. As we learn new things, our comfort zone expands to encompass that. And as we move through that fear, and going back to those two emotions that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, that fear emotion or that love emotion, it's really easy for our comfort zone to expand in that. When we're doing new things but we love it, it's a lot easier for our comfort zone to expand. But when we're doing things and we fear it, it's less easy. But it does happen. And it does depend on, I think, the level of fear and where that comes from. If it's just something that we've never done before and we're feeling a bit strange about doing it, or we've never done it, we think we don't want to get it wrong, there's that level of fear. And that, sometimes once we've done something, it's okay. We can do it again. But other times we can do things and we think, I never want to do that again. I know I've got to, but I don't want to feel those feelings again. But we know that we've got to do certain things for our business, for our role in our life as a parent, all sorts of reasons. And we have to keep doing it. And if it keeps coming up as a fear, I think we need to look back and where does that come from? Why? And do some work around that, whatever that work needs to be. Do the work around that and find out, or find new ways to do it. Find a way that suits you. Because as well, what I want to say that I really believe is that sometimes we can be in a world where somebody's telling us how we need to do something because that's the way it's done. It's not. Sometimes there are different ways. There are what's the saying? There are two ways to skin a cat or something like that. There are different ways to do things. And sometimes it's about you finding your way, the way that suits you. And that might be, I don't know, it might be not going live. It might be getting visible in other ways, whatever suits you. And I think it's really important to think right, I need to do this to grow and expand in me, in my development. But this is the way that I will feel happy doing it, and that's okay. We don't need to follow the prescriptions from other people all the time.
No, we don't. And I think it's really important to be kind to ourselves when we're stepping out of that comfort zone, and give yourself the recognition for the fact that you are moving beyond and you're doing something new. If that's that you've taken on a new responsibility in your role, be kind to yourself. Don't expect that you're going to get it right 100% of the time straight away, because you know what? You're human, and chances are you're going to get something wrong. But that's okay, because you can learn from that. And next time you'll do it differently. But be kind to yourself as you move out of that comfort zone. Your comfort zone, as we have said, it will start to move along with you. And you will look back and think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I used to find that difficult, because now this is my safe space. This is Becky in her little box. That this is my new comfort zone. And being able to look back and recognise how far that you have come when you have pushed yourself out of your comfort zone, it's a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you didn't, Becky. It's a really, really powerful tool. And I think if we leave you with any suggestion today of how you can help yourself move out of your comfort zone and face that fear and do something, it is, something's really stopping you, then just park it for a while and just have a little reflection on, actually, where have I come? What have I learned in the last 12 months, 2 years, 5 years? Where am I now? And just give yourself a pat on the back, because you will not be in the same place. You won't. You'll have learned new things and you'll have developed. And sometimes it's that recognition where you're able to say, okay, I'm going to give this thing a go. And if it's still tough, I think one of the things that really helps me is teaming up with somebody else, because I think I mentioned in an earlier podcast that I was going to start a podcast back in 2017. And I didn't do it. And it wasn't because I was consciously thinking about it for 3.5 years. I really wasn't, but I didn't do it. And one of the reasons I didn't do it is because I was a bit fearful. Would I have enough to say? Would I be saying the right things? And just having that accountability from Becky, she gives me the accountability and I give it back to her. It helps us get stuff done.
Here we are. Moving well out of our own comfort zones.
Or it felt it at first, but it feels quite nice now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that is just, a great example of it. That this was, the idea of doing a podcast for the pair of us was so far out of our comfort zone. I couldn't even see it. And yet here we are. We are doing it, and you are listening. So thank you very, very much for joining us again. I hope that this has been a useful episode for you.
Thank you for listening to Meet Me on the M53. If you'd like to know more, you can see Becky at questforest.co.uk and Faye at fayeblakey.com.
Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and thank you to Wahoo Media for our production. We'll see you next time on the M53.
Safe travels.